we're all confused when we heard it. So we're in class, and then my colleague came to tell me that, have you heard? I said, no, what is it? And then she said, I've been accused that I have scratched Maxwell. I'm like, but you did not work with Maxwell yesterday. And she said, yes, but that's what is happening. So because of that, they had to take my colleague out from the class. So they took her to a different class for an investigation. So because of what happened, they were trying to give some distance between the child and then my colleague. Hello, everybody. I hope you are all doing well. Welcome again to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mameya. If you're old here, you already know. So in today's video, I'm going to share something that happened when I was in London so we can all learn a thing or two. So welcome back again to the channel. All right, so I'm a teaching assistant. I'm a teaching assistant. No, I was a teaching assistant when I was in London. All right, so they normally call it TA, TA, teaching assistant and stuff like that. So I was working in a school where I was a teaching assistant, and then in my class, I was in I think class 9, and so with the class 9 students, they are about, let's say, 8 to 11, that age range. And it's nice working with them. Don't get me wrong, it is nice working with children, especially in that particular age range. But then in this particular settings, some of them are, so that particular school that I worked for, if I say a teaching assistant, I mean that I was working in a learning disability school. Okay, so we support the children. So it's just like you being a support slash a teaching assistant, because you help them when they have class lessons. You make sure that they go to the sensory room. When there's a dance class, you take them. You make sure like you engage them in various activities. So that's basically what we were doing as a teaching assistant. And each class has about 4 or 5 TAs, depending on the children. There are some class that the kids have challenging behavior. Some are autistic, some have learning disabilities, some also have Down syndrome. So it depends on the class and then the number of TAs they have. So in my class, we were about 4 TAs, and then together with the teacher. Okay. Okay, together, sorry about that, together with the teacher. So we're 5 in the class. Something happened. What happened? So something happened. That was in February. I'm not going to mention anybody's name. Okay, so let's just assume that this little boy is called Maxwell. Okay, so Maxwell has a challenging behavior, and I'm very sure those who are in the UK understand me when I say challenging behavior. When it happens, when they're in that kind of mood, they do anything at all. You get it? So we're all struggling working with Maxwell. And so because of that, we spoke with the class teacher, and we told him that, it's very difficult working with Maxwell. So it is not fair for just one TA to be working with him all the time. So you'd have to rotate us. So we all have a feel of him. Before that, it was just one of my colleague. There's this particular lady that was always working with him. So he became very fond of my colleague, you understand. So he was always mentioning her name. So we told the class teacher that it's not fair because it's very challenging working with him because of his behavior. And so he agreed and said, okay, fine, then he's going to rotate all of us so that we can all have a feel, like we can all work with him. So that particular day that this thing happened, um, that particular day, it wasn't my colleague that worked with him, it was a different TA that worked with him. Okay, and that day was when his thing came. If I say his thing came, like he was just destroying stuff, like hitting the children, bullying them, spitting. When it happens like that, he likes to spit. He spits at his colleagues, I mean his friends in the class. When it happens that way, we have to let everybody go out so we can deal with him. I mean, handle him, give him that space to do whatever he wants to do until he calms down. So that particular day, it wasn't that particular lady that was working with him. Okay, we had rotated, so it was a different TA that was working with him that day. And then he was just throwing tantrums. He was just doing his own thing. That thing, like when those who have challenging behaviors, when this thing happens, I'm sure some of you understand what I'm trying to say. So my other colleague was trying to, restrict him from hurting himself and then hurting other kids as well. And so after everything, I think my other colleagues and I were with the other children as well. And so we closed and then we all went home. The next day, we heard rumors that my colleague, my colleague has scratched this little boy. And then, because he's also fond of my other, because he's also fond of my other, okay, I'll stop saying my other colleague. Let me just use names. Okay, so let's assume that my colleague, colleague A is, colleague A is Sarah. Okay, so colleague A is the one that has always been working with Maxwell. And so, because of the challenges that we always face when we work with him, we told the class teacher to actually rotate us so that it will be fair on Sarah's side. You understand? So, that particular week that this incident happened, it wasn't Sarah that worked with him. It was, let me say, it was Juliet that worked with him. Okay. So, that was the day that he was spitting, destroying things, and everything in the class. But when he went home, I think he had some scratches or something like that. We are not too sure if it happened that particular day. When his mom asked him that what happened, he mentioned Sarah's name. Meanwhile, Sarah wasn't the one that worked with him that particular day. And you know how it is when somebody mentions your name, especially he being a kid. I mean, he being a child. You know how serious this thing is. They don't care whether what the child is saying is the truth or not. So far as your name has been mentioned, you're in trouble. So he said it was Sarah that scratched him. He told his mom. And there's a boy that is always mentioning Sarah's name. Everywhere he goes, he's mentioning her name. So that's how, he really likes Sarah a lot. But then when he went to him, he's just a child. So when he went to him and they asked him, who scratched you? And then he said, it is Sarah. His mom took it serious. And then she came to the school the next day. Then she went to see the headmaster. And then actually, she actually even took pictures of the scratches and everything, and then sent it to the class teacher and then the headmaster, saying that it was my colleague that scratched Maxwell. So that morning, we're all confused when we heard it. So we're in class, and then my colleague came to tell me that, have you heard? I said, no, what is it? And then she said, I've been accused that I have scratched Maxwell. I'm like, but you did not work with Maxwell yesterday. And she said, yes, but that's what is happening. So because of that, they had to take my colleague out from the class. So they took her to a different class for an investigation. So because of what happened, they were trying to give some distance between the child and then my colleague. So they took her out from my class, and then she went to a different class. So now she was working there. Lucky for her, they didn't even tell her to stay home. So she was working in a different class. Okay. And so the boy was still in my class. Now they started investigating. And then when that thing was happening that day, I was there, and then my colleague that is being accused was also there. So we all saw what happened. We actually went to the other kids outside. Yeah. So we're all surprised when her name was mentioned, because that day it wasn't Sarah that worked with him. You understand? And that's how serious these things can be. It is nice working with kids. We know how funny they can be, but that's how serious these things can also be. You understand? So just like I said earlier on, she was now taken to a different class so they can investigate this issue. Because according to his mom, when her son got home, there were scratches on his arms. There were scratches everywhere. So she took photos and then emailed it to the headmaster and then the class teacher, and we're all surprised, because even the other colleague that was working with him that day, we didn't really see anything like that, anything serious going on. She was just trying to restrict him because he was spitting, destroying things and stuff like that. So we didn't see that thing happening. That maybe she was grabbing him. She didn't do anything of that sort. You understand? But you can't defend situations like this until you are not guilty. You understand? So my colleague was taken to a different class, and then they started investigating. After that this thing happened in February, okay, after some months. And this my colleague also needs sponsorship. So she was actually been applying for jobs so she can actually move on. She came here as a student. So she's actually looking for a job so she can move on and then work. Now, because of this issue, she can't go anywhere. I'm sure most of you understand this, that if you're being investigated, you can't leave your job until everything is done. Because if you leave, then it will be like you are guilty. So she couldn't leave. She had to wait for them to finish the investigation. And this thing happened in February, way back in February. They were still investigating. I was having my lunch the other time, and then the safeguarding team, one of the ladies came to the canteen and said, I'm looking for so and so. She was looking for me because apparently I'm part of the witness. I was there, so I'm the witness. So she's looking for me. I'm like, what did I do? And then she said, can you come out with me? So I went out, and then she said there was an issue that happened some time ago, and my name was mentioned, that I was there when it happened. So I am a witness. And so Ladu or Lasu, I've forgotten their name. They are the ones that deal with incidents like this. Okay, so they are here to investigate what happened, and so they want to interrogate me. Hey, then I said, okay, I was eating. No, I had to cover my food, and I followed her, and then we entered there. When I entered, there were two gentlemen. So they told me to sit down. They asked me questions, and I explained everything to them. And I told them that that day it wasn't Sarah that was working with Maxwell. It was Juliet instead. So we're all surprised when her name was mentioned. So I think that's what saved her. She didn't work with Maxwell that day. Okay. So they asked a lot of questions. Do we have cameras in the class? I said, not that I know of. They asked a whole lot of questions. I told them that Maxwell has a challenging behavior. And so we are all struggling working with him. So it is not fair for just one person to be working with him all the time. And so we are the ones that asked the class teacher to rotate us. So that day that thing happened, it wasn't Sarah that was working with him. It was Juliet. So we are all surprised that her name was mentioned. Okay. And so they asked other questions and stuff. I don't really remember. It's been a long time. So they asked me a lot of questions and I answered. And then they thanked me. And then they put some notes down. They asked me to sign. And then I did. And so they left. I went to continue eating my food. And so that was what happened. Then after we were still investigating this thing, there was this day that we went for swimming. And then after swimming, one of the safeguarding team also saw another scar on this same boy's leg. And then they asked him, who did it? And then he mentioned somebody's name as well. This person's name that he mentioned is not even a regular worker in our school. Okay, because she is a student, she only has 20 hours to work. So she comes in like 3 times in a week. So that day that she came to work with Maxwell was her first day of coming to the school. Do you understand? I'm sure you're following the story. So that particular day that this thing happened was her first time that she had come to the school that particular week. And this car had been there, let's say 2 days ago. Okay. So when the safeguarding team saw the scar and they asked him, Maxwell, who did this? What happened? And then this boy mentioned the lady's name, she was even new in the school. She was new. She was just a month or so in the school. Okay. And just like I'm explaining, she hadn't been to the school that particular week. Okay. And then that scar too had been there for like two days or so. So she only came to work with Maxwell that day. And the scar isn't new. It was like a 2 day or so scar. When they asked him that who did it, then he mentioned this new lady's name that she did it. And one thing is that the moment these kids mention your name, they don't care. I'm very sure sometimes they just mention names anyhow, but they don't care. So far as your name has been mentioned, they have to look into it. So Maxwell mentioned this new lady's name that, okay, she is the cause of that scar. And now she was also being investigated. Okay, so the difference between these two incidents is that with the first colleague, she was lucky they only changed her class. But with the second one, because she was new, they asked her to stay home. Okay, they asked her to stay home until they are done with the investigation. Secondly, she can't work with children until they are done with the investigation and she's not guilty. And she can't also work with them. Just imagine the torture, like the emotional torture, like that kind of thing. You know very well you've not done something, and then they're telling you that stay home. On a second note, you've not done anything, and they're telling you that stay home. We can't work with you until they're done with the investigation. Secondly, you can't also work with children until we are done with the investigation. So this colleague was home. She was home. She couldn't work. She also couldn't apply to work with children until this whole thing is done. So she had to stay home for a long time. But then my other colleague was lucky; she was still coming to school until her case was done, and then they apologized to her and told her that after the investigation they realized she didn't have anything to do with it. And then lucky for the other lady too, the same thing happened. But with her case, she had to be home for like 3 weeks, no salary, nothing, because the two of them are all agency workers. You understand? And then the only thing is that the only good side of this thing is if you are a permanent staff, it means that you can still be coming to work and you still get paid. But then if you're an agency worker, it means that they don't owe you anything because you've not signed any contract with them or whatsoever. So you are just home. But then the first colleague was also an agency worker. Okay, she is still an agency worker. And then the second colleague is also an agency worker. But I think that the first colleague has been working with them for a while. So I'm sure they considered all of these things and then they asked her to still come to school, but in a different class. But this particular one, because she was new, they asked her to stay home, so they can't give her any shifts. She can't also apply to work with children until they're done with the investigation. And now when they were done, I think she sat home for like 3 or 4 weeks. When they were done, she called me and told them that I think you have to compensate me because I do not have any idea of whatsoever. This thing that happened, I had no idea because I only went to the class that day. And this car had been there for a while. So I mean, you guys accused me wrongly. So she sent an email to the agency explaining to them that they didn't treat her well. So she thinks that they have to at least compensate her. And they told her, we are sorry. We are just an agency worker. We've not signed any contract with you. And so there's nothing to give to you. Okay, all we can do is to now let you start. All we can do for you is to start giving you shifts again. Guys, I'm sharing this story with you for you to know how serious these things can be. It is nice working with children, there's no doubt about it. But this other side of the job is very, very, very serious. Because imagine if you are proven guilty. What will you do? I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. Your DBS will get affected. And even sometimes when you're applying for jobs, they ask you if you've had any incidents like this. What do you do? Do you say yes or no? You understand? So that's how serious these things can be. So I got scared. Honestly, I got so scared. And after that time, too, we're also planning to relocate from London to the East Midlands. So I had to request for a change of class because I didn't know when he was going to mention my name because I realized that anything that happens to him, when you ask him, he can just mention anybody's name at all. So I was beginning to get scared. So I just spoke with my agency and I told them because I was also an agency worker. So I was beginning to get scared that if my name is mentioned, it means that I wouldn't be able to do anything. I would have to be there until they're done with the investigation. So I told them to change my class. Okay. So they changed my class and then I was able to start searching for accommodation in the East Midlands until we found one. And so we've actually moved from London to the East Midlands. So this is a story that I want to share with you. That when these things happen, what do you even do? Who do you even talk to? Because we know how these things are in this part of the world. It is very, 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 they take these kind of things very serious. Sometimes deep down, they know very well that it is not true. Okay. But then they have to do their job. But then you are also being affected. Okay. Your emotions and everything. So I decided to share this story with you so that if you are coming into the UK or you're already here and you want to be a teaching assistant in this kind of field, you already know what can happen, okay, and then how to deal with these things. Like my situation, for instance, I had to change my class because I didn't want a situation where he'll mention my name and then I'll be stuck. Okay, because this thing I'm telling you happened in February and they actually finished this investigation not long ago. So imagine if you wanted to leave or you want to change jobs or something, you get a big opportunity and you want to move. So imagine if you get a big opportunity and you want to move, you cannot move. So just imagine you get a big opportunity or a good paying job and you want to leave. You can't leave because you have to wait for them to finish with the investigation before. So these are some of the things that happen in this kind of settings. You understand? It is very, very dangerous. Even though it is nice working with kids, these are some of the things that comes with it. So if you're already in the UK or you're planning to come here and you love to be in this kind of settings, like being a teaching assistant or something like that, you just have to be careful because these are some of the things that can happen to you. And imagine the emotions side of it. It's very draining. Okay, these colleagues that this thing happened to them, I was close, like we were very close. So I know what we're going through. Constant calls, calling, asking me if I've heard anything. Because the other lady was home. You understand? And she couldn't apply for any jobs anywhere. So you can understand how these things are. So I just decided to share this story with you so we can all be careful. Okay, and then know what to do when these things happen. Me, I just changed my class until we relocated. So that is what I wanted to share with you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, just like I said, thank you so much for coming. If you're old here, thank you for staying. My name is Mameya. I'll catch you again in my next video. Bye.